Find out what's happening this week in the world of books this and every Monday. Stay tuned. Welcome to Biblio Happy Hour's Biblio News segment, where we will be sharing new releases for this week, other titles to look out for in future, bookstore events, and what's trending. Before I get started, I just wanted you to know that you can listen to our off-the-cuff discussions, get our monthly top-shelf new release recommendations, behind-the-scenes content, perks, and more over on our Patreon page. Patreon is a super easy way to support the show, plus it helps us to grow and embark on new and amazing projects for both the book and bookstore community. So check out the details over at patreon.com/bibliofinder. And without further ado, here's what's new for the week of Monday, December 2nd. From Poison Pen Press, Death at the Durbar by Arjun Raj Gained. Death at the Durbar is the second installment in the second Maratha mystery, and is set against the backdrop of princely India during the heyday of the British Raj. Also new from Poison Pen Press, The Extremely Busy Woman's Guide to Self-Care by Suzanne Falter. This is a dedicated self-care guide for women who do it all. New from Source Books Fire, Scared Little Rabbits by A.V. Geiger. Running scared is not an option in this new pulse-pounding thriller. Also new from Source Books Fire is Just Don't Mention It by Estelle Mascame. This is a companion novel to the addictive, binge-worthy Dimily trilogy. Also new this week from Source Books Fire is Reverie, and we have the author Ryan Sala here with us on the show to share all the details. Ryan, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here as well. So your new book will be available this week on bookshelves everywhere. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you? How are you feeling?
Oh, I am ecstatic. I cannot wait for readers to get their hands on it.
Oh, I can only imagine just, how exciting that will be. And it will be even more real when you actually see it on shelves and more people posting about it. Oh, it's just a great time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't wait.
Absolutely. So tell us about your novel. Tell us about Reverie.
Yeah, absolutely. So Reverie is a story about Kane Montgomery. He's a young gay kid growing up in Connecticut in the United States. And his world is sort of turned on its head, I should say, when he wakes up after this mysterious accident that robs him of his memories, and he has to sort of piece together who he was and what he was doing the night that he lost his memories. And to make things worse, he ends up encountering this war for the rights to reality where battles are played out in these vast living dreamscapes called reveries. Mm-hmm. And it's up to him and a few other chosen teens to figure out how to infiltrate these reveries. They can be any genre. They have action, they have adventure. And they've got to figure out how to fit in and unravel them from the inside out. And further, to make things just a little bit more complicated, because that might not be enough for some, they've actually got some competition. In the reveries, there's also a maniacal drag queen sorceress named Posey, whose goals are mysterious, but somehow conflict with the main characters as they seek to return reality to normal.
Ooh, okay. How did you come up with the concept for this novel, and what gave you the idea to create the character Kane?
The concept itself, I think, comes from just my own childhood of always wanting to escape into fantasies and wanting to kind of bring a cast of characters with me from world to world. I remember playing games growing up like Kingdom Hearts that I thought were so neat because you got to sort of keep consistent characters through different worlds that sort of changed who you were in them. And I loved that concept. And I was always looking for a place in fantasy to kind of live out my own daydreams. And so the actual concept of reveries directly comes out of just like my urge as a little kid to kind of escape into worlds and explore them and then, sort of see how they work. And then Kane is actually a lot like I was when I was younger. He's a young queer kid growing up in Connecticut. That's all true for me too. And actually the sort of the pivotal thing that happens to him in his childhood that sets him on a track of being sort of escapist and avoidant is he's outed at a really early age and doesn't quite know what to do with this like new status of his. And that was actually me too. I like distinctly remember sort of feeling alienated. That's what brought me into the world of fantasy.
So what parts of the book did you enjoy writing the most? The beginning, the middle, or the end? What did you enjoy?
The middle. I love daydreaming and sort of crafting things, but ultimately the most fun part of writing Reverie was actually like building all of the cool worlds that I got to explore. And I love world building. I just do it compulsively. And so being able to kind of create all these different worlds and their magic systems and kind of the mythology that goes into them was a ton of fun. And a lot of it had to be edited out because, books have to end.
Yeah.
But the actual act of getting to kind of like explore these worlds and dream all these things up and then actually write them out and have characters explore them was a ton of fun for me.
Okay. And when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
Usually I am annoying my roommates' dogs by sitting with them on their dog bed and singing to them, or sometimes I'm just annoying my roommates directly when they're trying to have like a nice night, but I can't stop talking about books that I'm reading. I am, because I work from home and because I spend a lot of time writing, I'm sort of this like weird shut-in character in New York, so I spend a lot of time just around the house doing stuff. I have to make a really concerted effort to kind of get out of the house. So if not doing those two things, I try to make it to the gym as often as I can and kind of get some physical activity into my schedule. But I also like to go to live shows. And recently, since moving to New York, which was this past summer, I've been trying to explore the drag scene here. There are a lot of great bars that have like awesome drag shows and performers, and I'm trying to slowly make my way through the family here.
Oh, awesome. So what would you say is your favorite childhood book?
Okay, so whenever I get this question, it sort of throws me because I actually was not a really big reader as a kid. I had a lot of trouble with reading. I was sort of slow to it and had to sort of find my way to books, I think a little bit like later in life. And so as a result, like I was a little bit behind, I think, a lot of my peers. And so the books that I was reading, for the most part, I actually ended up sticking to comic books and Japanese manga, which are comic books. They were easier to read, they were easier to digest, and I just loved the combination of imagery and art and just found it to be like much more compelling than these like huge blocks of text. So a lot of like what I would consider to be my favorite texts as a kid were, like Sailor Moon and things that were sort of in that genre of media.
Okay. Because half of our show on this podcast is all about bookstores, specifically indie bookstores and booksellers. Tell us some of your favorite indie bookstores.
Oh my God, I'm going to make so many enemies answering this. I love indie bookstores and I try to go to them all the time. I am really excited because I'm doing the Reverie launch at Books of Wonder in New York City. That'll be tomorrow. But because I'm new to New York, I can't not mention some of my favorites that are in Boston, where I lived for 10 years. Porter Square Books is like, I used to go there all the time because it was right down the street from my office, and I used to go to their cafe. I would write there. I went to tons of author events there, and then also Brookline Booksmith is just a absolutely incredible store. It was further away than the other one, so I didn't go as often. But they have like a ton of incredible events, and exploring that store has been great. And then of course, like Trident on Newbury Street is definitely a place worth stopping if you are in Boston for even just the day.
Okay, but getting back to Reverie, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a lot of authors sort of ask themselves that. I definitely do, because I'm always thinking, like, what do I want sort of the legacy of this book or the impact of a book to be before I put it out into the world? And I probably would have answered this a little bit different when I was writing it, but now as I receive feedback from readers and people reach out to me with like their impressions, the thing that makes me the most excited is when someone tells me that they put down my book and thought about it for a little bit, and the first thing they felt like doing after was going and writing a story themselves or going and creating something themselves, basically externalizing some sort of like creative expression. Because a lot of the book deals with, not just dreaming inwardly, but sort of dreaming outwardly and changing the world around you to kind of reflect your inner fantasy. So hearing that people feel like creating or feel like writing as a result of reading my work is always just the best compliment I can receive.
Absolutely. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Reverie will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, December 3rd.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Awesome. I had a great time too. Tune in to our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page, where I will continue the conversation with author Ryan Sala. Ryan shares more about his process writing Reverie, his schedule when writing between working a 9-to-5 job, a book he'd like to see more people reading, his favorite fictitious mode of travel, and he also shares some other projects he's working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New from Flatiron Books, Free Melania, the Unauthorized Biography by Kate Bennett. Also new from Flatiron Books, Where the World Ends by Geraldine McCaw-Grahan. This is a story of 8 boys stranded on a rock in the middle of the sea, left to fight for their survival. New from MCD Books, Dead Astronauts by Jeff Vandermeer. New from FSG Books, New Selected Poems by Tom Gunn, edited by Clive Wilmer. Also new from FSG Books, Frédéric Chopin by Dr. Alan Walker. This is the landmark biography of a Polish composer by one of the leading authorities on Chopin. New from Picador, Creative Selection by Ken Kosienda. This is an insider's account of Apple's creative process during the golden years of Steve Jobs. New from Thomas Dune Books, When Reagan Sent in the Marines by Patrick J. Sloyan. This is an action-packed account of Reagan's failures in the 1983 Marines barracks bombings in Beirut. Also new from Thomas Dune Books, 1973, Rock at the Crossroads by Andrew Grant Jackson. This is a fascinating account of the music and epic social change of 1973, a defining year for David Bowie, Bruce Springsteen, Pink Floyd, Elton John, Elvis Presley, and former members of the Beatles. New from St. Martin's Press, Labyrinth of Ice by Buddy Levy. This book highlights the incredible true story of the Greely expedition, one of the most harrowing adventures in the annals of the polar exploration. Also new from St. Martin's Press, Overthrow, The War with China and North Korea, The Fall of an Empire by David Poyer. New this week from Bloomsbury is Letita Rod and the Case of the Wandering Scholar by Kate Saunders. MC Beaton meets Miss Marple in the second book in the Letita Rod Mysteries, which sees Kate Saunders, Victorian detective, on the hunt for a missing Oxford academic. Also new from Bloomsbury, How to Be a Dictator, The Cult of Personality in the 20th Century by Frank DeCotta. This is a sweeping and timely study of 20th century dictators and the development of the modern cult of personality. New from Henry Holt and Company, BYR, Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. This is book 2 in the Legacy of Orisha. New from Forge Books, The Attempted Murder of Teddy Roosevelt by Bert Solomon. This is a historical thriller from political journalist and Washington insider Bert Solomon, featuring Teddy Roosevelt's near-death, accident, or assassination attempt. New from Minotaur Books, Trace of Evil, a Natalie Lockhart novel by Alice Blanchard. This is the first book in a new series by Alice Blanchard, which brings a bold detective assigned to a gripping murder case in an isolated New England town. Also new from Minotaur Books is Thin Ice by Paige Shelton, and we have the author here with us to share all the details. Paige, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So I know this isn't your first rodeo. You've done series before, you've had books out before, but Thin Ice is the first book in this brand new series for you, and it will be available on bookshelves tomorrow. How excited are you? How are you feeling?
I am enormously excited. Of course, it's exciting from the very beginning when the book is going to be written and going to be out there in the world. And then all of a sudden you feel like that's ages away, but then all of a sudden it's there. And so my excitement kind of zips up every day with a new spin of adrenaline when I see how close it's getting.
Absolutely. Tell us about your novel. Tell us about Thin Ice and what can readers expect?
It's about a successful thriller writer who had been abducted by her stalker and kept in his van for 3 days. She escaped the van, but she doesn't remember most of the details of what happened to her over those days. She flings herself out of the van and is taken to the hospital where she has to have a subdural hematoma removed. That's brain surgery. After the surgery, she's still scared and decides she needs to get far away until her abductor is found. She sneaks into her surgeon's office and searches the internet for a place she can hide and finds Benedict, Alaska, a fictional town I set just outside Glacier Bay National Park. She then sneaks out of the hospital and uses techniques she's learned as a writer to run away to Benedict, leaving as little trace as possible. But once there, she realizes she's probably found the perfect spot because surely no one can find her where there's barely any internet or cell phone availability, where only a couple roads are paved and most of the life is the wildlife. However, shortly after she arrives, she hears about a mysterious death that recently occurred and wonders, could that tragedy have anything to do with her or her abductor? Did she really get away, and will she ever remember what happened to her?
Okay. So tell us a bit about your process. How long did it take for you to write this book? And what is your work schedule like when you're writing?
I try to work every day about a 5 to 6 hour writing day. Monday through Friday. I try to take weekends off. That rarely happens. This book took about 6 months to write.
Okay. And where do you get most of your writing done? Do you write at home? Do you go out of the home? Where do you write?
I have an office in my house that's really the only place I can write. I would love to be cool and be able to write at a coffee shop, but I get too distracted and I start daydreaming. So I just close my door and ignore everyone and write only in my office.
Okay. So if you didn't write, what would you do for work, or what would be your alternative escape? What would you do?
You know, I'm not even trying to be funny when I say this, but I would probably be working in jobs daydreaming about being a writer. I I spent a lot of years in advertising and in the newspaper industry. I loved it. I loved it so much. But I did spend a lot of time daydreaming about writing. I'd spend my evenings writing, my weekends writing. And when my work wasn't keeping me too busy, I was thinking about writing. So that's whatever it would be. I would probably be in advertising, daydreaming about writing books.
All right. And when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
Hanging out with my husband. We love to go to movies. We love to ride our bikes. We live in Arizona along an area that has a long canal, and you can ride your bikes along that canal, and that's very fun. Our son is grown, so we're empty nesters, and so we just are able to pick up and go do kind of whatever we want to do, and that's been fun. As much as I miss having our kid around, it's been a whole new adventure.
Absolutely. So part of the podcast is about indie bookstores and indie booksellers. Tell us some of your favorite indie bookstores.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe how blessed I've been with indie bookstores in my life. Here in Arizona, in Scottsdale, is the Poison Pen, and they are incredible. They are so supportive of all mystery writers, but local writers in particular, and they are just an extraordinary place and always an extraordinary experience to go to. I lived in Salt Lake City for a long time, and the King's English is up there, and that's another great bookstore, indie bookstore. Here in Arizona, again, we have Changing Hands, and they are terrific as well. I love Mysterious Galaxy, Murder by the Book. They're just amazing, and I hope they stay forever. forever. They make our world a better place.
Absolutely. So getting back to your book, Thin Ice, how do you want readers to feel after reading this book?
Oh, I want them really excited to get the second book, first of all. First of all, but I also, the goal for my main character, I hope to somehow portray a woman who is stronger than she thinks she is, and who will have the ability to heal from some of the worst trauma anyone could imagine going through, and have a wonderful, adventurous life ahead.
Okay, awesome. Paige, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everyone, Thin Ice will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, December 3rd.
Thank you so much, Victoria. This has been so much fun.
Absolutely. I had a lot of fun too. Tune in to our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page, where I will continue the conversation with author Paige Shelton. She shares more about her concept for Thin Ice and the parts she enjoyed writing the most. We also talk about how her process has changed since publishing her first handful of books, and how it's different for new writers to get published today. She also shares her favorite childhood books and other projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New in paperback from Eco Books, The General Zapped an Angel, a story collection by Howard Fast. Also new from Eco Books, The Sacrament by Olaf Olafsson. This is a haunting, vivid story of a nun whose past returns to her in unexpected ways, all while investigating a mysterious death and a series of harrowing abuse claims. Also new from Eco Books, Oppo by Tom Rosenstiel. This is a breathless and highly charged political thriller. It's the story of a senator who is offered the vice presidential slot by both parties' presidential nominees, and then gets ominous threats. New this week from Harper Books, Mary Ball Washington, The Untold Story of George Washington's Mother by Craig Shirley. Also new from Harper Books, All That Heaven Allows by Mark Griffin. This is a biography of Rock Hudson. New this week from Harper Paperbacks, Moment of Truth by Lisa Scottoline. And The Vendetta Defense by Lisa Scottoline. New this week from Harper Perennial is Anyone by Charles Sewell. Sewell brings his signature knowledge and wariness of technology to his sophomore novel set in a realistic future about a brilliant female scientist who creates a technology that allows for the transfer of human consciousness between bodies, and the transformations this process wreaks upon the world. New from Harper Via, The German House by Annette Hess, translated by Elizabeth Laufer. The German House is set against the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials of 1963. New from William Morrow Paperbacks, The Clergyman's Wife by Molly Greeley. New this week from Scribner Books is Alice Adams by Carol Slenica. New from Simon Pulse is Watch Over Me by Mila Gray. This is a novel about a young woman desperately trying to protect her family from their violent father, who finds safety and a passionate romance with an ex-Marine. New from Skyhorse Books, Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales by Dylan Howard, Melissa Cronin, and James Robertson. New from Simon & Schuster, Supreme Ambition, Brett Kavanaugh and the Conservative Takeover by Ruth Marcus. New this week from Atria Books is A Bookshop in Berlin, the rediscovered memoir of one woman's harrowing escape from the Nazis by Francois Frankel with a preface by Patrick Modiano. New this week from Berkeley Books is Meg and Joe by Virginia Cantra. Meg and Joe is a heartwarming modern novel inspired by the timeless classic Little Women. New this week from Dutton Books is Reputation, and we have the author Sara Shepard here with us to share all the details. Sara, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We're so excited to have you. So, I know this is far from your first rodeo. You've done many books before, but Reputation will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
I am very excited. I always get a little nervous every time a book of mine comes out, but I've heard that a lot of people like it so far, and I think it is filled with suspense and some very interesting characters, and I can't wait to hear what readers think about it.
Awesome. Tell us about your novel Reputation. What is it about? What can readers expect?
So it is about a university in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's not a real place. It is sort of a made-up college, but it's a very prestigious school. There is a school-wide email hack, and everybody's emails get dumped onto a main server that anybody can go onto and take a peek at and find out things about anybody connected with this college. So an administrator, students, teachers. There's a hospital attached, so doctors, nurses, people working in the giving department, like anybody with a sort of Aldrich EDU email address. So you can only imagine that some scandals start to break and things begin to go haywire. And it follows the story of quite a few women, but at the center of it are two sisters. Their names are Kit and Willa, and Kit has remained in the college town where she grew up. Willa has left because of kind of a secret that we find out later. But Kit's husband is connected to this school, and a scandal comes out about him, and something terrible happens, basically. And it's kind of the community is rocked by this happening and other things in the hack coming out. And it's kind of a thriller following a lot of different things. But
Okay. Who would you say is your favorite character in the novel?
oh man, I don't know. I love all of them, and I do a lot of books that are multi POV. You know, for me to get into everybody's story, I have to really love them and love their story and be invested. I mean, there's just a whole range of things happening. You know, there's sort of what the two sisters struggle with. I mean, Kit, she's kind of in the middle of this murder mystery. Willa, she's returned to her hometown and is kind of like struggling with making peace with things that happened in her past. But then there are these other characters. There's a character named Laura who is a new mom, and she kind of has this dark secret that she's keeping from her husband that's really intriguing, and she was so much fun to write about. There is a younger character named Raina who is trying to better herself but make terrible, terrible choices and is a little bit of a schemer. And then there's a character named Lynn who I always kind of like writing kind of unlikable characters. I feel like Lynn is a little bit of an unlikable character. She is one of those women who definitely does not support other women. She wants to be the best. She is so ready to gossip. She's so ready to spread gossip. She finds out that this hack happened and is like, oh, I'm going on to see who I can bring down. But she had some really fun chapters too. So I don't know. I kind of love writing about all of them. Sorry, that's like a little bit of a cop-out.
No, it's okay. I won't force you to choose at all. And when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
I am a runner. I love probably run every day or almost every day. I have 2 kids. They're pretty young, so I'm dealing with them. I am hanging out with friends. I am cooking and just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, just hanging out. That's completely fine too. What would you say is your favorite childhood book?
I loved anything by Roald Dahl. So, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Matilda or The Witches or anything like that. I loved the Ramona Quimby books by Beverly Cleary. Mm-hmm. And then as I got older, there were these thriller series by Lois Lowry. And she was famous for writing like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Killing Mr. Griffin. And that was sort of my first introduction to thrillers and like suspense. And kind of reading something where you're at the edge of your seat. So that was really fun. And then, as a young child, I kind of, YA didn't really exist when I was growing up. So I got into adult novels pretty quickly. I would read a lot of what my mom kind of read first and said, oh, this is good. So I read a lot of literary fiction, but I also read a lot of Stephen King, which I love Stephen King. I was probably reading it way too young, but those novels definitely stick with you.
Absolutely. What was the last book you finished, or what are you currently reading?
The last book I finished is Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's Weiner.
It's actually the first book I read by her, but I loved it. I thought it was really wonderful. The next book I'm going to read is Olive Again, the Olive Kittredge second book, which is interesting because most of the time I do read thrillers, but I have kind of taken a little break. But I'm sure I will get back into thrillers. There are so many good ones coming out. So.
Okay. So half of the podcast is about indie booksellers and indie bookstores, and because we love them so much and we're always trying to share that indie love. What are some of your favorite indie bookstores?
So I have to definitely talk about the ones that are near me in Pittsburgh. There is the Penguin Bookshop in Sewickley, Pennsylvania. In fact, I'm doing an event there this week. There's another indie bookstore in Pittsburgh called White Whale Books that is really lovely. And I've been to so many different indie bookstores throughout the country, but one of my favorites, not in my hometown, is a store called Books and Greetings, and it is in northern New Jersey. The owner, his name is Kenny, and he just does a wonderful job of getting authors in, getting readers in to see authors, connecting readers with the right books. He just has a great selection of stuff. He has a huge heart. I have loved that store. So whenever I can hit that on a tour, I always try to get there.
Awesome. But getting back to Reputation, if you could describe this novel in 3 words, what would they be?
Well, I would say, suspenseful, twisty, but it's also sort of a cautionary tale.
Okay.
Because it's like we all have things in our email. I mean, hopefully not the things that these people have in their emails, but, we all have things that maybe we aren't super proud of. And what does that feel like if it is all released into the world?
Right. Yeah, definitely cautionary tale indeed. And how do you want readers to feel after reading Reputation?
When it's all said and done, it's about these 2 sisters and family and secrets and, how do you preserve your reputation and what happens if, that reputation is ruined. And so I want them, I hope that readers are satisfied with the end, because that's, as a thriller writer, it's kind of like you don't want people to figure out your ending, on page 2. So hopefully that won't happen. But I also, I hope they kind of are satisfied with where the sisters get to at the end of the book, together and apart, and just with their lives. I feel like I worked really hard on kind of their relationship and what the right thing was, the right way for them to end up, and kind of the right note to end on, and how things tie together. So, I'm eager to hear what readers think about these particular characters and their overall story.
Absolutely. Sara, thank you so much for coming on the show. Reputation will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, December 3rd.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Absolutely. I had a lot of fun too. Tune in to our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page, where I will continue the conversation with author Sara Shepard. She shares more about the concept for her novel Reputation, the process behind writing this novel amongst her others, what her work schedule is like when she's writing. We also talked about how publishing has changed, and she also shares the other projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New from G.P. Putnam's Sons, Genesis by Robin Cook. New in paperback from G.P. Putnam, The Paragon Hotel by Lindsay Fay. Also new from G.P. Putnam, Would Like to Meet by Rachel Winters. New this week from Random House is The Selected Letters of Ralph Ellison by Ralph Ellison, John F. Callahan, and Mark C. Connor. New from Melville House is The Revisionaries by A.R. Moxon. New from Soho Crime, Wintergrave by Helene Thurston, translated by Marlene Delagi. This is a thrilling mystery set in rural Sweden. New this week from Little Brown and Company, One Long River of Song by Brian Doyle with an introduction by David James Duncan. New this week from Basic Books, Land of Tears, the exploration and exploitation of equatorial Africa by Robert Harms. This is a historian's epic account of the scramble to control equatorial Africa. Alrighty everyone, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. And special thanks to Ryan LaSala, Paige Shelton, and Sara Shepard for coming on the show. A list of all the books mentioned in the show will be available over at bibliohappyhour.com. Don't forget to follow Biblio Happy Hour on social media and sign up for newsletters. To shop all the books I've mentioned in the show and to find a bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. To listen to our off-the-cuff discussions, get our monthly top shelf new release recommendations, behind-the-scenes content, perks, and more, head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder. And wherever you're listening, please don't forget to share, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Alrighty everyone, that's it, and I look forward to talking to you in next week's show.